Okay, hello. I am really excited about this because this only just occurred to me not too long ago. Um, I was very bored today and I decided to take a walk, and I was thinking about different kinds of things that I was trying to settle in my mind about native culture. And several little tidbits of information that I had acquired over the past several years kind of started clicking, and I think I figured out something very important and very interesting. First off, we have this is generally concerning several tribal entities, namely the Ojibwe, the Abenaki, the Iroquois, and also a couple of other groups, namely the Apache, and also quite possibly Vikings. Uh, but anyway, what I knew about Ojibwe culture is that they clearly believe that they came from um, the New England region. Namely, they point to roughly New York, which is more or less about exactly where the Iroquois are now. However, we have no clue at what point in history. We know the Iroquois invaded this region, but we really have no clue at what point in history that this happened. Um, However, there was something else that I had learned a while further back, was that we have the Apache. And part of the Apache oral tradition is they used to live over by the Great Lakes, and they were banished for practicing black magic. And furthermore, from that, I believe someone has done research and found out that Apache is actually an Algonquin language. That's very similar, I believe, to Ojibwe, or at least to some of the Algonquin languages of the Lake Superior region and up into Canada. And this actually makes something even more interesting. What we know about the Apache religion, what I know is that they have a belief in primarily in skinwalkers as part of what they call their black magic, where they believe their shamans can possess or take the form of animals, which I've just recently learned is also part of Abenaki religion. At least the little bits and pieces that they're willing to talk about publicly. But Ojibwe religion is actually much more similar to Iroquois religion, with some Abenaki ideas mixed in, than it is to actual Abenaki religion. So it appears that when the Iroquois invaded and the Ojibwe people moved out, they came to the Lake Superior region where they were allowed to settle. They possibly, I believe, mixed their blood with a lot of the people who were there, but ultimately came out on top. But then the Apache people would have been banished from this region and went on a long exodus, eventually ending up in the Southwest, where they settled for practicing black magic. Seemingly they did not want to give up their Abenaki religious beliefs, and so were kicked out of their own society, so that their other people could have a home, could settle. But this is something else. Now, it's never really been decided exactly when this whole thing happened, but there is something else that we know about the Apaches. It's believed that when the Apaches made it to the Southwest, they found refuge with a civilization that existed in that region called the Anasazi. And they were with the Anasazi long term and adapted a lot of their religious beliefs into their own before the Anasazi culture collapsed. It's actually believed that the Apache may be what is left of the blood of the Anasazi culture. But since the Anasazi were an actual civilization, we can actually date them. The Anasazi culture collapsed roughly in about, give or take, 1300 AD. So this makes it very interesting. That would mean this whole thing happened in the 13th century, this whole exodus of the Iroquois coming into and taking over Abenaki territory, the Ojibwe moving, the 11th or 12th century, which is not just the height of the Mississippian culture. We believe in the 1200s, the Mississippian culture was at its highest point, which the Mississippian culture was a group of city-states that existed all along the Mississippi River, down into the southern states, and a little bit off into the Great Plains towards Yellowstone National Park. And it's believed that a lot of native tribes from throughout that region are derived from that blood. Particularly a lot of the nations of the South, I'm assuming definitely the groups like the Winnebago and the Cheyenne would have been connected to it. But the good thing that makes that we have that knowing that this would have happened in the 11 to 1200s is that we also know that the Vikings in their chronicles, where they believe they came to Vinland, which we now know for a fact, we've proven archaeologically that they did come at least as far as the Gulf of St. Lawrence and into the St. Lawrence River Valley. So they were in that region, and they got there in the 1300s. And what they claimed was that they made very good friends with the native peoples, and then somehow things turned very wrong very fast. A war started, which they got caught in the middle of, and they were forced to leave. So they were not there for very long. Now, the Mississippians honestly were a culture that thrived primarily on trade. We know that they were getting copper from the Lake Superior region. They were getting obsidian from Yellowstone National Park. And just moving all of this merchandise all over the entire region. The Iroquois, we believe, came from more or less north of the Great Lakes region, so they would have been aware of it, but not connected to it. So as they move in and begin conquering, you'll notice the places that they did conquer. They took most of the eastern part of the Great Lakes. They got the headwaters of the Ohio River, which flows into the Mississippi. They went up into the St. Lawrence River region. So it appears that their whole purpose for conquering was actually meant to give themselves a major bonus in the whole Mississippian culture system. The problem is that entering into the 1300s, shortly after that they had conquered this region, the Mississippian culture starts to collapse. And by the time whites got here, it still technically existed, but it was a shadow of what it had once been. And a couple of explorers, we believe, may have come in contact with some Mississippian remnants, but that culture was completely gone. And we're lucky we even know about it, because they never, other than stone artwork, they really did not do much of anything architecturally. Most of their cities, if you look them up, they kind of consist of just big pyramid-shaped hills, which chieftains or shamans would build their homes on top of. And the city would surround that, the city and then the agricultural fields. So, although this may have even been urged along by the fact that the Ojibwe got displaced and ended up taking the region of the Lake Superior area where those copper mines were. That may have disrupted trade, although I don't think it was ultimately what destroyed their culture. We believe it may have been drought. We know that the Ojibwe also, in that book that I have, there's a myth detailing this belief that the spirits felt that people were people feeling that they had a mastery over the natural world through their mass agriculture was too prideful, it was too greedy, and they punished people by having a massive die-off of agriculture. And it is only kind of through a miracle and through the idea of kind of going back to basics that they were able to still continue to have agriculture at all. Essentially being, we can't farm these massive numbers of plants anymore for whatever natural reason may have happened, but we can still farm in small amounts for personal use, for family use. So that probably finally is settling a lot of the a lot of ideas about the history of this entire region. Just from a few random bits of information there. Obviously a lot more work should be done if this is true. But if it is, that is amazing. We've managed to, if people have managed to recover a little bit more of the history of the native peoples in this continent, then anyway, have a nice day.